started. Yeah. So,
Okay.
welcome everyone. My name is Terence Latimer. I am the community manager for the RevOps Masters community found on LinkedIn. I'm also a project guide, fractional executive, and subject matter expert with Atomic Revenue, a revenue operations and sales enablement firm. Um, Originally based in St. Louis, however, we operate a distributed remote team, which is partially our superpower in that we have a group of wicked smart problem solvers all across the country designed to help our clients achieve their revenue operations and sales enablement goals. Um, I'm really excited to be here today as part of our webinar series, where I am chatting with a new member of our community, Miss Ariel. And help me pronounce your last name, Ariel. Is it
Yes.
Balogun?
Balagoon, yes.
Balogun, Ariel
Yeah.
Balogun,
Yeah.
who is a rock star, people operations, revenue operations expert, based in, oh, and looks like we have a guest that is participating today. So I'll go ahead
Okay.
and invite or allow Carol into the room.
Okay.
Hey, Carol. Welcome to the community. We just asked that you mute yourself during today's conversation, and we will have a portion for our Q&A portion, I should say, just in case you have any questions. I was just introducing Ariel, but Ariel, why don't you just go ahead and take the mic from me and tell everybody a little bit about yourself
Yeah. Thank you,
and what
Terrence.
it is that you do, and we'll go ahead and get started.
Thank you. Yeah. So hey everyone, I'm Arriel Balogun. I am the founder of Infinitely Elevated, a revenue operations career coaching firm. I'm really excited to be here to help just kind of uncover more about revenue operations. I literally talked to a potential client last week, and they were interviewing for a company that just heard about revenue operations about a week ago. So I want to change that narrative. I want to share all things RevOps as much as I can in this hour. Like I said, so excited to be here and looking forward to your questions as well.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for that introduction. And people are starting to trickle in. Again, the reminder is as you enter the room, just go ahead and please mute yourself. We will have a Q&A portion that will take place here in a bit so that you can get a little bit more insight into Ariel. That being said, we're going to go ahead and get started with our interview. And just as a reminder, the goal today is to help revenue operations professionals understand how people operations and the rise of fractional executives specifically are transforming team structures. That includes hiring practices and go-to-market strategies. And ultimately, we're looking to provide some context to what that means for RevOps, for sales enablement, and long-term career growth. Not sure if any of you are in the job market, and if you are paying any attention to the, both macro and microeconomic environment that we're currently operating in. It feels as though lots of us are struggling in terms of being able to land the right types of jobs, right? And so, part of today's conversation is being able to take a really hard look at what the job market looks like and how firms can stay competitive through this concept of embracing fractional executives and ultimately how that impacts, again, both revenue operations and people operations. One of the anchor stats that we have really aligned ourselves with today has been that it turns out about 60% of employers are expecting to transform their businesses by 2030. That's super indicative of digital transformation strategies. And so we really want to keep that at the forefront of today's conversation. Ariel, talk to us a little bit about how you got into the field. Again, you provided some background in terms of who you are, what it is that you do, and your bailiwick in terms of your passions. But talk to us a little bit about how you entered into the field of people operations.
Got it. So to kind of start from the beginning, I stumbled upon revenue operations in particular. I started my career in finance, and then by virtue of being curious and wanting to solve problems, I landed in again pivoted my career into revenue operations. Then, as I started to excel in revenue operations, then came people operations. So, how do I get my teams, so my actual team, cross-functional teams, to work together and be in alignment to toward the same goals? And that's not always an easy thing to do, especially when RevOps largely is still kind of misunderstood. So, it was a equal balance of I'm not trying to step on toes. I actually want to solve this problem for you, for us, so that we can align and achieve the company goals together. So, long story long on that one, but that's how I got into people operations and loved it. Like, honestly, like seeing people have the light bulb moments in their careers, understanding that okay, this is not quite a RevOps strength for me or strength in general or skill set that I even currently have, and I want to develop that, how I can help people get from where they are today to where they want to be in the future, especially when it comes to their own career trajectory.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that response. And I think you hit on something that it has been really apparent for me over the past 3 years working with Atomic Revenue, which, believe it or not, we actually just hit our 10-year anniversary, which our org is currently celebrating. You know, obviously that, or at least in my opinion, that feat in and of itself. But that being said, I think to your whole point, both revenue operations and sales enablement are grossly misunderstood in my perspective. And, so much of our work comes in the form of, helping to communicate ultimately our domain expertise and how revenue operations sort of trickles and influences other aspects of our clients'
Mhm,
businesses. And there are a ton of overlapping concepts. Again, we've already, briefly hit on people operations, but then financial operations, for example, marketing operations, et cetera, et cetera. These are really indicative of both long-term viability,
mhm,
profitability, and all sorts of other things as it relates to, workflows and how people get the job done. One of my favorite definitions comes from HubSpot, where they describe that marketing, sales, and customer support all have operational needs. And revenue operations, or RevOps, consolidates all of these in order to provide your customers with a seamless experience from first contact to close deal and beyond.
mhm.
So that being said, Aria, what role do you believe that RevOps and PeopleOps play in aligning with strategy execution in fast-moving organizations?
That's such a great question. Um, so I see RevOps as like, if we're thinking of a body, I see RevOps as the brain and I see people operations as the heart. And we need to align both the head and the heart so that we can scale businesses sustainably. So that is kind of the focus that I've been driving home on is like how do we align the people as well as the processes, the data, et cetera, like all in one, and how do we work together? Um, so just to kind of dovetail like more into that is thinking about RevOps translating the vision of the company into measurable action. And PeopleOps is around the human-centered aspect of that vision and how those people that are performing these tasks, jobs, projects, duties are aligned, equipped, and most importantly, retained. So we want to invest that time and attention into our people who are also facilitating getting the company to that measurable vision as well. And so I think back to when this was done very well when I was in my career in tech. So I collaborated not only with HR, so in my RevOps function, yes, collaborated with HR as well as department heads to co create onboarding guides for each of the departments. Um, and having HR have a seat at the table so that they understand and they can talk to that when we are interviewing for potential new hires, talking about forecast planning and working with sales and capacity models and um, just to be able to enable our teams, our people to have faster ramp times so that we build morale, we have smarter hiring decisions, and then have that ultimately that competitive edge. Because again, RevOps is focused on alignment. So that's how we are competitive when we integrate versus isolate. So you kind of touched on like the silos, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but it's really about integration and not having those team silos.
Yeah, absolutely, and really well said, Ariel. And the way that I like to think about it is in the form of the elevation of information into knowledge and then ultimately into wisdom,
Hmm.
particularly through this lens of your analogy of a body, right? And the way that we can sort of anecdotally consider that is if you have a new team hire, so much of your resources, have been invested on the front end in terms of being able to recruit and, identify and ultimately train a teammate to be successful ultimately, within their job function or their job role. And, so much of that work then comes in the form of ensuring that you have the proper documentation, the proper workflows, right? That will ultimately set somebody up for success so that they can work independently. And I think, one thing to be mindful of and to consider, I think, to that whole point is having a replicable, successful process that can then integrate and onboard new teammates where maybe it's not as heavy of an investment on the front end, right? Over and over again, where you're sort of losing your shirt on the front end, right? And, I think something to also then be mindful of is what happens when things don't work out, for example. What's the old saying? The best laid plans. Anyways, I think I'm going to totally like bloody that. But ultimately, I think really I'm really trying to get to is the culture aspect of an
Yes.
organization. And if you do not have this proper alignment of the overlap between your workflows, your processes, and how that is indicative of the way that a team completes a task together or completes a function together,
Hmm.
ultimately you are at risk for lots of things, right? Including teammates leaving, that institutional knowledge being lost, et cetera, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so talk to me a little bit, or talk to us, I should say, a little bit about empowering our teammates to be successful. In your view, what are some practical ways that fractional leaders or ops professionals can empower the teams that they ultimately support?
Got it. So when you talk about fractional work, I do want to kind of start with the understanding that fractional doesn't mean less than. So it means very focused. And so when we talk about empowerment from a place of someone who is coming in to do a very focused job, you really want to work on establishing clarity in the outcomes and the goals, and building trust at the same time. Because again, we're trying to do things fast. So building the clarity alongside trust, it has to go hand in hand. Really being laser focused on like feedback loops, that's like one of the most critical things that we could do as like fractional leaders, etc. Like very early on, like understanding, like I want that information, I want you to kind of talk to me about a challenge. What are your thought processes on problem solving? And then actually going and figuring out how to solve it and coming back to me with what, what's working, what's not, and so that we can kind of, again, align and make sure that we regain that focus. So for practical advice for those listening, I would say quick retrospectives. Those have been a game changer for me, for my teams, cross functional teams as well, so that we always align on what's working, what's not. I honestly, as an independent or IC back in the day, I had my own lessons learned log. So that's something I learned through
Mm,
project management. But if I want to move fast, I can't keep making the same mistakes, or I can't allow people from different teams to make similar mistakes. And so by being that voice in the room to say, hey, we've done this way. These are some of the gotchas, and I don't want to see us fail in this way. And so, how can we think from a place of knowledge and a foundational understanding of how we want to level up together so that we
yeah.
can do it? Um, Check-ins help, shared dashboards help. Something I'm thinking like all back to my career, it's bringing it all up, Terrence. But even things of having a racy model from like the very
Yeah.
beginning to understand like who actually is in charge. Because if we have seven people that want that seat at the table and have their voice heard, that can be very confusing, and we don't know how to move forward. So racing model helps. Daily stand-ups help. What are the top priorities? What items have been completed? Where can I request help? And then shared project or task trackers, like just for the visibility within the RevOps team. What are we all working on? Because that's also sometimes a sore spot for RevOps. Like, how do we quantify what the heck we're working on all day? It's not just the
Sure.
data and the systems, but making sure that we have that even in an intake form, like so that it's like not just like, hey, RevOps person, I really like help with a new dashboard or a new fancy shiny X, Y, and Z, because again, we're operators, and so we need to think about how things are connected and not just one off. So very long-winded there, but, like, to bring it home, empowerment starts with clarity and trust, and so I've given you a lot of information on how you can start to establish that, um, starting from day one.
Yeah, no, really well said, and I'm not long-winded at all. I think you hit on some very specific actionable items that teams can employ or implement. One of the ways that I like to think about it, I use number one, I use acronyms for most things, and then I also love rhyming conventions. But one of those rhyming conventions comes in the form of tools and rules. And
Mhm,
something that I'm so and I think again, just mindful of, the tool of a RACI chart and, what are the rules of the road in terms of how are we using that specific tool in order to keep teammates accountable. And we can even apply that same logic and or methodology in the form of the softwares or workflows that are available to us, right?
mhm,
What are the tool like, being able to quickly identify or define what the tool is and what then are the rules of the road in terms of how teammates, can effectively leverage those tools in order to build the thing or the things that we are responsible for building together, right?
mhm,
And something that I'm so mindful of, again, just through this lens of analogy, is I always tell people, particularly as we're, considering the investment strategies that take place in the form of assessing the tools that we are then providing to our
mhm,
teammates, is that just because you have a really fancy hammer doesn't mean that you know how to build a house, right? And so much of that work then comes in the form of really identifying the right tools and being able to train people on how to leverage them properly in order to then again effectively build out the things that we are responsible for building, right?
yeah. And that I actually want to like hit home on that too, because when you talk about tools and you're talking about enablement, you really need to think about how people learn. So I can't just show you once and expect you to be an expert. And then that was one of the big things that I love. I love a good process, but then to be able to have people essentially use the tools and the rules appropriately, you have to show them over and over again. I am one person. I have a sales team of like 40, or I have a customer success team of 25. I can't replicate myself. So I had to think creatively back in the day. So I was doing essentially like Loom videos before it was even a thing.
Yes. Yes.
To like coach people through like, this is how we use the tool, these are the expectations on how to use it, this is what it looks like to use this system, this tool effectively, and these are places where we have some room to grow. So if you have some feedback, guess what, here is a Google form, that you can fill out, make your suggestions, because it's not in RevOps always a set it and forget it approach. Like, we always want to iterate, evolve, take the feedback that we're getting from our customers. So whether they're internal or external customers, taking that feedback and making it even better so that it actually works for us. The tools and the rules work for us.
Oh my goodness, yes, absolutely, and yeah, and I totally agree with you, and how I've even been pushing some of the limits or boundaries of the training come in the form of, I really appreciate your example of leveraging Loom videos, and so much of that is a discipline of, if you are exploring or assessing a new tool, for example, it's opening up Loom or Zoom in advance and just recording even the
Mhm,
exploration, right? To then even, begin the process of communicating, hey, well, this is what I'm doing right
yep,
now. And, that then becomes the opportunity to provide training materials and or resources to teammates so that they don't have to go through the same perhaps difficult process of learning something new.
mhm,
I think some of that also, I think Google, for example, Google Classroom is a really great opportunity in order to develop curriculum around a specific, subject.
Yep.
and being able to provide, again, training materials in the form of assessment, certifications, et cetera, for teammates is
Mhm.
always an opportunity to develop some internal confidences, in my opinion.
Yep.
So yeah, really well said.
Thank
So
you.
let's talk a little bit about some advice that maybe you can offer Ariel in terms of someone that's interested in making the leap, and not go that leap from a full-time contributor to perhaps, making the leap over to a fractional executive or independent consultant. What best
Got it.
advice did you offer?
Um, Oh, so much advice, but I'll try to limit myself as like the critical ones. The first thing I would say is don't wait until you feel like 100% ready. That's not quite a thing. You just have to like jump in there and take the first leap, even if it's like a little baby toe, leap into it to kind of understand what you're getting yourself into. Asking questions. I heard it's called a listening tour, but go around, ask people that are already doing it, that are in your network. What does a fractional executive really mean to you? How does it work? What models have you seen that don't work? If you want to do an independent consultancy, I would definitely say make sure you have some savings and some support, like have more savings than you can think of, because sometimes with operational expenses, that might sneak up on you, or you might want to change your tool. I've changed my CRM twice so far. I finally found one that works better for me. But just thinking about that. But also, while you're still as a full-time contributor, I would say use your reputation, use your network that you have now to build that momentum to your next step as fractional exec or independent consultant. So that means documenting your wins, clarifying your value propositions, your niche, your specialization, and showing up as like a thought partner, not just a doer. Because again, if you're coming into fractional work, we're expecting you to hit the ground running with teams, with processes, et cetera, to achieve goals. So how can you start to think strategically on how you would help a certain market or markets with your skill set?
Yeah, absolutely. And to have or ask an additional question, just particularly through this lens of people operations, I'm curious, can you maybe talk to us a little bit about trends in the job market that you've been able to observe?
Yeah, so the biggest thing that I'm seeing, and I can give it from the lens of like fractional versus independent contributors, et cetera. Um, I'm seeing a shift from rigid careers. Like I just want to go, this was me back in the day. I just want to be a CFO. That was me. And I need to do all the steps and all the things to become a CFO. Now it's more of a dynamic career where I'm seeing. And this is fractional and IC. Um, where people want to have focus. So there's a lot more specialization, a lot of making sure that you have your niche down pat and you understand the pain points through the value that you have through your specialization. So what I mean by that is people really want more purpose, they want more autonomy, they want more impact, and so they're finding ways to do that. So, uh, one person that I'm working with, she's been a fractional executive for some time in RevOps, but because she is very focused on a few things in RevOps, she's also able to focus on her passion, which is baking. So she has her own baking business. So there's a duality there. It's a lot of work. And she's is very vocal about that. It is a lot of work, but it adds to more of her overall life fulfillment. Um, and then back to the question around the shifts, and specifically around the World Economic Forum, the 2025 report. There's a quote in there. I want to make sure that this is called out because this is super critical, especially for this conversation. It says 44% of workers' skills will be disrupted in the next 5 years.
Yes.
Think about that.
Yep.
44%, that's almost half. So if we think about how we want to show up to work and how we work, do you want to have autonomy? Do you want to have purpose? Do you want to have impact? Do you want to have time for your passion project that you've been putting aside for the seventh year in a row and never really got to it? Like, this is the time to think about your skills, how they align with the market, Do you need to upskill, reskill, like learn new skills, and really not be afraid? I know that the job market is tough. I get it. There's coaches out there like me that can help you through those transitions. There's communities out there like the RevOps Masters that you don't have to go through these things alone because we're all literally trying to thrive in a state of extreme fluctuation. So
Yes.
why not do it together?
Wow. Wow, really well said. And I'm in total alignment with you. I think that, again, if we're just studying economic theory and being able to then look at historical patterns to be able to make predictions on future states, certainly the elephant in the room comes in the form of AI and how that has been the ultimate disruptor. From a very practical standpoint, how that
Mhm.
has then been applicable to the average job search. I think I saw recently the average job is receiving anywhere from like 600 to 800 job applicants,
Oh,
for
oh
example.
yeah. Mhm.
Right.
And so like that there is a lot of saturation, and I think a part of that too is because a lot of folks, again, in during this time, during this tough economic time, tough job market, they're just applying to everything. Can I just get my foot in the door somewhere, anywhere, today, yesterday, even last
Right.
week? And so to not make light of that, I understand, and I totally get it. But because a lot of folks, especially the ones that I come in contact with, and even I'm on LinkedIn all the time, they don't have that focus, that specialization, or that niche. That has always been the best feedback that I can give you, because if your your experience and skills align to one type of role and one type of job, but you're applying to these companies and these roles that have nothing to do with that, and it makes no sense, then you're just going to be another number in the pile rather than being at the top of a pile that makes sense for you. And I don't want to say like pile, but like top of the selection process for recruiters and hiring managers, because your skills, your experience directly aligns with what they're looking for. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's what yes, that's the biggest thing I can see, especially talking about those numbers. There's a lot of people just applying everywhere, and I would strongly urge you to not do that, to take a step back, think about what you want, the skills you have, and how it aligns to certain types of industries or job functions, etc. To make your time and their time worthwhile, I would say.
Yeah. And the key to that, in my opinion, or at least what I'm hearing, is well, I think it's two things. I think it's knowing thyself, right? Thy skill sets, your background, and ultimately your value proposition, and how you're then able to offer that to the
Hmm.
organizations that you're interested in aligning yourself with. And some of that I think comes in the form of, again, just like the cultural alignment, and how that even comes in the form of empathy to recruiters.
Hmm.
Right. And I certainly recognize the job search might be, or the job search process, particularly here in 2025, might be frustrating. And if we're then mindful of what recruiters are currently experiencing, and being able, or being forced into a position where it becomes their job perhaps to narrow in on the one person, right? Having to go through, that stack of 800 job applications, and really having to sift through, ultimately what aren't cultural fits or skill fits, right?
Hmm.
To hopefully, find that one needle in the haystack, right? Which,
Hmm.
certainly I think, if we are then mindful of offering ourselves the best chances for success, I think so much of that comes in the form of really understanding, are you interested in being an individual contributor? Or, to your whole point, right? Are you interested in working on a part-time or a fractional
Yeah.
basis, and being able to invest in the projects, or, the hobbies that, are most calling to you? Certainly the pandemic was an eye opener for so many of us, in terms of, the efficiencies making themselves available through remote work. And, I think that we're then compounding, or seeing, an expansion of such with AI, and, how that is ultimately impacting the way that organizations are envisioning themselves in the future. And
Absolutely.
so, I think, a really important part of that is certainly understanding what type of teammate you are interested in being moving into the future.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay. So, moving along, Ariel, you've built a platform around revenue operations and go-to-market professionals that are navigating those career transitions.
Hmm.
Um, what patterns or gaps do you consistently see in how companies support or fail to support their talent?
Um, so we kind of touched upon it before.
We
So
did.
we talked about tools, we talked about training and enablement. But where I see a lot of companies fall short is through those transitions. And I myself have felt kind of some companies dropping the ball a little bit on supporting me through that transition. So they'll say, congrats, you got the promotion, or congrats, you got the raise and more responsibility. But okay, like, okay, now that I've leveled up, how do I then work to your goals or work toward this? Like I have a general understanding, but I need some guidance here. I'm not, I've never been one to thrive in a sink or swim situation or culture or company culture. So I'm like, I want a little bit of check-ins or checkpoints so that I can guide you. So that's why I started the business the way that I did and have the program so that we talk about those larger gotchas within your career transition. So whether it is a move up or a move over, um, that still requires some work, especially in those first 90 days, where you're thinking about like, how do I really have an impact in my new role? How do I kind of shed the expectations that people had of me of my last role now that I have this new role? So thinking through those transitions and how to help people communicate their value and have quick wins and think about the longevity of their role so that they are not faced with like imposter syndrome or burnout because you're doing a lot of things that kind of create a lot of attention for your role and for what you're doing, but making sure that it's also in alignment. And so that's where I'm saying, okay, let's take a step back. And there was, again, no one there for me kind of to say like, okay, how do we take a step back? Let's assess why I got the promotion and what I need to do now that I have it. And so that's where I'm trying to help people take a step back for themselves and they can have very direct conversations with their leadership team to say, okay, from a data standpoint, I believe in the golden triangle. So that's people, process, and technology. So, how do I look at it from a people standpoint? What do I need to make sure that I'm successful in this role? Do I have the resources, the budget to make sure that we can complete certain OKRs or meet the demands, that we need to hit these KPIs. When you think about processes, what do I need to level up as far as our processes, and then the technology as well. So definitely regularly taking a look at that tech stack and make sure it makes sense, and looking at the data and dashboards to make sure those still make sense. Um, and then coming to your leadership team with a different angle or a different lens. That wasn't something that I inherently knew how to do, and a lot of people kind of struggle with that. And from what I've seen, and you kind of heard the experiences of people that I'm working with, and that's where they struggle. And they're like, okay, how do I have these very candid, raw conversations without feeling like an imposter or like the big dunce in the room? I want to show up very polished. And so being kind of their thought partner and being able to do that, again, we'll work together and we'll make sure that you're hitting the nail on the head, and not doing it alone. It's hard to do
Yeah,
alone.
well said. Well said. And I think, and hopefully I'm not asking the same question and, too well, in too much of the
Ask
same
away.
way.
Ask away.
Um, but I certainly believe again that fractional executives or fractional work is gaining traction. I think ultimately the challenge comes in the form of the level of comfortability. And that, there has been, this sort of shift from a traditional 9 to 5 and in terms of, then being able to define contract work and working with fractional executives. And so if we're flipping the lens a little bit, from the job searcher or the fractional executive themselves to the organization,
Mhm.
my question is what do you wish more organizations knew about working with fractional executives, consultants, and contract workers?
Oh, that's a good one. The focus starts with the company. So what goals do you want this fractional executive to focus on? And not kind of coming at it from a lens of, oh, we got to fix this problem. Let's bring in a fractional executive. Like, no, bring us in the room when you're ready to make a change and you're ready to do it methodically. You're ready to do it in from a way that we are not operating in silos. We're coming at this together. So bringing that, having people from a culture, a company culture standpoint, understand that this fractional executive is coming in to help us make a change. So whether it is going from $1 million in 1 million ARR to 10 million ARR, 10 million ARR to 20 million ARR, because numbers what drives us in revenue operations. But what is the goal? And then making sure that people are aware and understand that we're going to work on this together. Because a lot of times we're seeing like, oh, just fix this problem. Like we already kind of started down this rabbit hole of poor strategy, and so now we're trying to right that wrong, and so that's kind of not the best approach to do it. For folks that are curious about RevOps, I would say there's a lot of YouTube videos out there. There's a lot of communities out there to understand how it truly works, because expecting a fractional executive specifically in RevOps to function as a silo is just not going to work. And so, like having that clarity around what you want them to focus on and the strategy behind it is not only going to do you a good service, but it's going to do you the best. Um, yeah, yeah. You're not hiring a savior here. It's
Yeah.
a strategic partner. That's the best way I can kind of round that out.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's super fascinating and well said. And sort of what I've been struggling with, or what I have been struggling with, is, and I'm big on nomenclature and labeling conventions, and how, your title helps you to establish your identity, and your identity then provides so much information related to autonomy, reporting structure,
Mhm,
roles and responsibilities. I think broadly what we've been seeing in the market is this shift away from consulting roles in so many different ways. And again, that vernacular has then been replaced with fractional executives,
mhm.
which has been a little bit tricky for me to understand and to follow. For example, I think the headline several years ago was that McKinsey had laid off about 2,000 members of their staff, right? And recognizing that, again, McKinsey was driving efficiencies, but they have been sort of the 500-pound elephant in the room, or is it 500-pound gorilla? Either or. um, you know, but and again, I don't know if this is just changing market dynamics, but this sort of pivot away from consulting as a practice. And I suppose like the true change comes in the form of the integration of the fractional executive into the
Mhm,
culture, whereas there's a pure dichotomy between the consultant and the actual client. Um,
correct.
but it's just a little bit of an update to the understanding or the definition that I sort of struggle with. And have you noticed that trend as well, moving
Yes,
with
yes,
consulting?
absolutely, absolutely. There's so many more fractional executive roles out there. If you're thinking about it from the company standpoint, to hire a seat of C-suites is very expensive. And right now, like I said, the economy where it's not doing too hot right now. So everybody has to think about how they're saving their dollars and cents. But we don't want that opportunity cost to be like, well, that means we have someone that is not truly invested in our company, our mission, our values. But we need somebody that has that level of skills and expertise. We just maybe can't afford them 100% of the time, or maybe we just need them a little bit, and we need some focus in these areas before we can bring them on full time. So that is a huge shift in going thinking about like the consulting aspect, where you have a wealth of not like wealth of knowledge and unlimited or untapped resources kind of at your fingertips, if you will. You just have to ask for the right team members, rather than thinking about it from a 360 kind of viewpoint, which is I need someone that's going to be locked in on this with me, and where if I'm the small guy in the room or small lady, small, they're not the consultant company is not just gonna kick me to the curb and kinda come back to me when they can, if there's a bigger fish or more dollars being thrown at them
Right.
for larger projects. So the smaller companies will be stifled, and we can even see that on like a very micro level as well, where cost is if impacting and affecting a lot of people in a lot of different ways. And so how can we still be strategic and get that skill and get that experience that we need to be able to show up and do more things with the product that we have and the customers we're looking to serve.
Yeah, really well said, and I really appreciate the perspective, and I think this is lost on many people, is that just because you're a fractional executive doesn't mean that you then don't have the opportunity to become more fully embedded or incorporated into the organization. And
Mhm,
there's so many ways for that to happen. I mean, it could be an increase in your workload, the number of hours, to your whole point, perhaps this is a trial period where they are
mhm,
interested in maybe elevating you to a full-time role at a later time. There are even partnership opportunities and
mhm.
the opportunity to perhaps become a small business owner, or, somebody that has an equity stake in the
Yes.
organization.
Mhm,
And so I think it becomes really important, to your whole point, to be, particularly mindful of long-term goals, both from the client's perspective as well as from your own perspective. And,
mhm.
part of that responsibility comes in the form of, during that sort of dating phase and getting to know you
Yeah.
phase a little bit. It's like, hey, well, where do you see me, or where do you see us in 5 years or 10
Mhm.
years, right? And then being able to offer a plan, that is a match for both. Um, Okay, so we've only got a couple more questions before we head over into our Q&A section. And so let's, try to power through these, and then, we'll have about 10 minutes for, our guests today to ask any questions that they may have. But if we are being, specific to your experience in SaaS and
Mhm.
SaaS teams, and well, SaaS, I should say, and then scaling teams, um, DEI has been, a really big focus, or has been in the limelight recently.
Mhm.
And I guess my question for you is, how can RevOps functions be more inclusive and representative of the diverse teams and perspectives that they are, empowered to support?
Gotcha. Yeah. So back in the day in tech, I spent a little over 2 years leading DEI as a second job to my job. So I was in RevOps and I did DEI. And now I kind of stay connected with the DEI community and folks within. But understanding inclusion, especially in RevOps, means there needs to be access and exposure. So having access to know that this even exists and exposure to know, like, now that I know that it exists, well then how do I thrive, how can I work within it? So having just webinars like today, where we are exposing people to it and from all different backgrounds. I will say, like I said, I stumbled into RevOps from finance. I've hired non-traditional backgrounds. um, One person came from construction background. um, we like everyone was like, I don't understand why you think this person's going to be a great fit. I'm like, trust me, like it's there. The framework is there. And then a honestly a new college grad that was super curious around processes and data, had done a little bit of work in an academic setting, but I was like, okay, they have again that framework, that foundation of what RevOps is truly all about, and they have enough curiosity and grit to really figure this out. And we still connect today. And he's like, I thank you for my career because I am now thriving in it. And he just got another job, again. So that I would say access and exposure starting there. But when it comes to diversity, thinking about how we recruit, how we train, and how we promote people. Because again, RevOps needs to think of problems holistically, not just from products, pain points, or finance or marketing or sales, etc. We also have to have the diversity of thought and backgrounds to be able to understand, okay, how can we support our teams, how can we support the company to build the best things possible for the world that we live in. And so I actually have a little bit of a story to tell on this one, where I'm doing my thing. I'm in RevOps. I'm loving, having my PowerPoint presentations and like showcasing what each teams are doing and how we're making transitions and strides in the right direction. And after one of the meetings, it took this person some time. It was a senior executive actually that came to me, and I had regular one-on-one sessions with all my VPs at the time. So whether it was a walk and talk or hey, we just, connect on Zoom or something. He goes, hey, Ariel, like, I really love what you're doing, but honestly, I can't read it. I said, what do you mean you can't read it? The PowerPoint's right there. Like, so a little bit to my knowledge, he informed me that he was colorblind. And so because of that, I needed to change even the colors that I use so that it would be visible. Because imagine being able to show up to a meeting, you're like super excited, but then you only get like half the information because you literally can't read it. So thinking about how people learn differently. Accessibility is another thing that we need to touch upon.
Yes.
Um, so I'm giving you all of it, but like recruiting, training, promoting, and then supporting, accessibility, supporting people that learn differently, as best as we can, right? And so that helps us create better products when we think about solving problems outside of ourselves. That's what I want to think about as far as inclusion. Um, Thinking about it, just if everybody can take themselves and take it one step ahead, like think about how this product or service can support someone that doesn't look like them or doesn't have the same background, if you will, to make sure that everyone can show up and everybody has access, exposure, um, to the products and services that we bring to this world.
Yeah, certainly. And, I think really well said, Ariel. And, the data continues to show that the diversity of thought offers greater creative outlooks and
Mhm,
possibilities, which then directly has an impact on organizations' bottom line, which is something, we particularly need to be considerate of, the profitability aspect. And,
mhm,
I think to your whole point, I truly believe that the accessibility aspect is certainly the next frontier, particularly as we are then mindful of the different generations and how
mhm,
it becomes really important, in my opinion, for some of that cross-functional collaboration to take place, and how that then ultimately impacts best practices based off of new and developing technologies, and how that ultimately again impacts long-term organizational health. And
mhm,
Atomic spoke about this at one of our recent webinars. Last month, we had a webinar related to change management. And, again, going back to this analogy of operating as a body, it becomes really important, in my opinion, for us to consider the way that our body manages change, right? Based off
mhm,
of where we are at in terms of the life cycle, right? Which, again, every organization is different. That being said, we've got two more questions. What role does equity play in workforce design, and how do we ensure that operational excellence doesn't come at the cost or at the expense of humanity?
oof. All right, Terrence.
Sorry, heavy question.
Heavy, heavy, but no, no, no. I appreciate it. Because so when we think about equity and not coming at the cost of humanity, it's recognizing that everyone starts at the same place generally. Um, so we want to still have that like foundational respect and understanding, um, but also designing systems that account for there's sometimes disparities, and do have to understand that as well, but understanding that and having a system that can design or account for that. So specifically we can think about how we maybe want to redefine high performance, because high performance can mean different things for different people. My high performance means I go 150% that day. But if I give you 150% that day, guess what? Like maybe the next day is not quite there, and thinking about how my 150% may be somebody else's 75. So
Mm,
thinking about high performance and giving people autonomy to be able to say, hey, I know I can do this work. Like sometimes I pulled all nighters to get stuff done back in the day. That's just how I work. And I was like, if I do this and I get this done, can we have some type of a flexible work arrangement where I can show up a little bit later the next
sure.
day because I do want to get some sleep and I actually have my deliverables ready for you. Um, that's also coming to a place where we're ensuring that the enablement strategy includes, like I said, diversity of background, diversity of thought, neurodiverse individuals and learning styles. Um, Adding DEI back into the mix. We're starting to see this, that um, some companies are actually wanting to have some DEI back in it, like after they stripped it away. But it can't sit on the sidelines. And when we say DEI, so diversity, equity, inclusion, and I even want to put belonging in there. So people have to feel like they actually belong at the company, not that they're there to just show up, do work, and like check out and bye bye. Like you have to have skin in the game. We think about that as fractional work too. I mentioned that because otherwise we would show up as consultants and clock in and clock
Sure.
out, and that's it.
Sure.
So thinking also about, again, back to my golden triangle, people, we think about the process and the workflows, and the data as well, and the technology that we're using. We want to have an all encompassing view of that, and making sure that equity isn't lost. And like I said, always thinking one step at least outside of yourself, to say, like, how, through the work that I do or the work that I can do at any level, can this support or help someone that's not directly in my shoes? And thinking through RevOps and the work that you do in that lens.
Yeah, absolutely. A key component to all of that, in my opinion, and we're seeing this across, both marketing and sales alignment, comes in the form, and I just say it's a natural progression related to people operations in the form of personalization.
Mm-hmm.
And I think personalization is just so important in 2025 and beyond in terms of, again, what it means to personalize while also standardizing, right?
Yeah.
The work experience, right? But again, just recognizing that a company is a collection of individuals that then come together. And so it becomes really important to treat members as individual contributors, but then also that they then see themselves as members of the team. And members of the team have different roles and responsibilities, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it becomes really important that we're able to see um, ourselves in one another, in my
Mm-hmm.
opinion. So our last question here before we open it up for Q&A, in 1 minute or less, Ariel, my question is what's one mindset shift set, what is one mindset shift or operational change that you believe will define the future of work in the next 3 to 5 years?
All right, in 60 seconds, I would say shifting away from this obsession over output, like just the numbers, numbers, numbers. They are important and they can guide us to do better things. But I would strongly urge us to think about the next chapter or the next wave of, how do I say, impact with intention. So, are we making the right impact intentionally, not just kind of stumbling upon it? So, it does require some forethought, thinking ahead, thinking outside of ourselves, seeing ourselves inside of other people, so that we can make smarter bets, as a RevOps team, as a function, as an industry, and contribute a lot of what we do as RevOps operators, fractional execs, to help bring along other parts of the organization. So whether it's the culture, and being able to support adaptability, not just efficiency, I would say that.
Really well said. And thank you so much for agreeing to be interviewed by me today, Ariel. We really
Of course.
appreciate your subject matter expertise. We've got about 5 minutes. We've got, looks like 4 or 5 people in the room. If anyone has any questions, please do me a favor and either raise your hand, drop your question in the chat, or if you feel comfortable unmuting yourself, please feel free. But the platform is all of yours. Okay, so it looks like
Okay.
we have a question from Carol. And Carol says, from your experience, what are the different types of RevOps leaders that you've seen?
So there can be RevOps leaders that report into different structures, and I think that has been one of the biggest shifts that I've seen. They didn't really know where to put RevOps. So, like, does it go under finance? Does it go under operations? Does it go under sales? Like chief revenue officer? Where do we find the most alignment? To be quite honest, I liked when RevOps functioned under an operations executive. Because again, there's different goals and focuses. Um, Based on who you report to, and you don't want to skew your attention, your time, your golden triangle all towards the focus of that one team, because the goal is to cultivate alignment across all teams. So operations would be the best.
Really well said. Yeah, it's yeah, and I agree with you. It's been a little bit tricky. I think that I've seen different styles of, RevOps contributors. I think to your whole point, having a really strong organizational chart that, then communicates a sense of logic is really important. And some of that then just comes in the form of how teams are structured,
Mhm,
directly related to departments, right? And sometimes that is related to product and or service lines, for example. But yeah, I think it's completely individual to the organization, but I do
mhm.
see a ton of alignment with the operational function. Okay, so our next question from Naveen is, how can the mindset necessary for fractional executives be applied to individuals in their early to mid careers looking to get consulting experience?
That's a great question. Um, the biggest thing I would say on is right now is deepen your knowledge in your niche or specialization, because there's different problems at different stages of all businesses. And if you think about, well, what problems are the type of clients I'd like to work with, what types of problems are they facing, and thinking about that early on in your career to say, like, if you're still in school or you're thinking about your education, what classes are you taking so that you can think, for your future self and help your future, career journey. And thinking about what specializations are coming up. So if you look at the World Economic Report, like, think about what is changing and what literally these companies saying that they're going to do in the next 5 years or so, and start to align yourself with the changes that are coming.
Really well said. Well, we're just at about time now. I do want to do a couple of house cleaning items. Certainly want to, obviously thank Ariel for participating today. This was such a valuable experience, and just deeply appreciate you making time out today to offer your subject matter expertise. I also really want to encourage this community. If you are not a member of our RevOps Masters community on LinkedIn, I went ahead and dropped the link in the chat. Would encourage you to join. We want to get to know you better and learn how we might be able to serve you. Feel free. I'm sure Ariel is open to you connecting with her on LinkedIn. She's also a member of our community,
I
so
am.
feel free to drop your LinkedIn link, your LinkedIn profile in the chat, Ariel. Um,
Sure.
but again, the goal is to go live or to host these webinars more often. And so, again, our RevOps Masters community is an opportunity to align with other subject matter experts. I also do want to communicate that Atomic Revenue has another webinar taking place on Tuesday, April 29th. where we're getting a little bit more specific and talking about marketing and sales alignment. And that's with two members of our collaboratorium, Simon and Susan, who
Mhm.
again are both fractional executives, members of our Atomic Collaboratorium, offering their subject matter expertise, I should say, to all of you as an opportunity to, again, be able to take some of their knowledge and background and being able to apply that to your career. But again, thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. The replay will be up first in our RevOps Masters community before we distribute to our YouTube channel. So, again, if you have like any questions or things that maybe have come up a little bit later, feel free to drop a comment on the video. And again, I or Ariel will get back to you. But thank you so much for the time today, everyone. And Ariel, if you have any closing thoughts or questions or things that you'd like to say, please feel free to close us out today.
Yeah, I am so happy to see all of you on today. I appreciate being able to share some knowledge. Keep in touch with me. No question's a bad question unless you don't ask.
That's right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great Tuesday.
All right.
Take
Bye,
care.
everyone.